Hello everyone, this will be the 5th chapter of The Second Life of the Guardian, written and read by Insect Overlord. This chapter is titled, What's This? Trauma? No thanks, you can have it back. And there is content warnings for graphic depictions of violence, character death, aftermath of meltdown including self-harm, dissociation, and brain fog. The first day of preschool came too soon. Izuku stood outside the doors of the building with his mother, 2 big backpacks strapped on his back. He had tried to convince his parents he didn't need to go, that he was smart enough to go without school. His parents had shared a look and got out a pencil and paper, then sat him down at the table and asked him to write his name. Izuku quickly realized that while he could speak Japanese perfectly fine, although he tended to dumb his words down so his parents didn't get too suspicious, he couldn't write or read it. He was half tempted to write his name in French just to see the looks on their faces, but quickly shook off the idea. Which brings him to the doors of the preschool. Inside are a bunch of snot-nosed 3 to 5-year-olds that Izuku will be expected to get along with. Ready, Izuku? His mother smiled kindly down at him. Izuku shrugged, looking more like a soldier about to go to war than an almost 4-year-old at his first day of preschool. Yeah, okay. The building was loud. Too loud for his small body to handle. Children were screaming all around him, a few crying for their parents, but most just babbling happily. Izuku hoped it wouldn't be like this every day. He quickly placed his hands on his ears to muffle the noise. "Ah, Midoriya-kun, and you must be little Izuku-chan," came a voice above him. Towering above Izuku was a tall woman, although everyone seemed tall to him, wearing a long yellow skirt with a crayon-themed sweater. She had bright pink skin and matching hair and box braids. She had deep black eyes like a raccoon with yellow pupils. Izuku wanted to ask her about her quirk. "Do you want to put your bag away? You have your very own cubby." Izuku was glad. He didn't want any other children touching his stuff. He was still a little cautious of germs after the Akuma Miss Virus. Izuku's mom followed him to his cubby. His teacher, who had introduced herself as Ashido-sensei, showed him how his name was written across the top. Izuku made sure to take note of how the kanji were written so he could copy them later. One of Izuku's accommodations was that he could go to a teacher at any time and ask for quiet time. Then the teacher would lead him to an empty room, save a couch, where he could calm down. Izuku was glad they set that up, because the thought of staying in the same room with all of this noise for a full day had him wanting to scratch off his skin. When his mom said she had to leave, it took all of Izuku's self-control not to start crying on the spot. He was a teenager, dang it! He had fought in a war for 3 years. He could handle a few hours without his mommy. Still, that didn't mean he wanted to. Left to his own devices, Izuku started to explore the room. There was a set of tables to the left with craft supplies set up. To the far right was an area for circle time, with a shelf full of activities in front of it. In the middle of the room, towards the front, there was a play kitchen set up. Around the entrance was a wall just tall enough that Izuku couldn't see over it, and a small safety gate with a child lock. Drat, his only weakness. Izuku saw Katsuki playing in the play kitchen with few other kids, but decided against joining him just yet. Too loud. Instead, he headed towards the activity shelf. There was a small girl there building blocks. She had pale skin, frizzy pink hair, and a manic gleam in her eyes. Izuku was intrigued. When Izuku was close enough to sit down, she looked up and tilted her head. "Why are you covering your ears?" "Too loud. Why aren't you?" he asked back. Really, though, how could she just sit and play blocks in this chaos? The girl just shrugged. "What's your name?" "I'm May. My mom calls me May. My mom calls me Izuku, or baby, but I'm not a baby." He pouted. It was cute when he was actually a baby, but he was almost 4. Even if he didn't have the memories of his past life, that was still practically an adult. "I'm not a baby either," May sympathized. See? May understood him. May continued to build her tower, with Izuku watching quietly, until the teacher called them for circle time. "All right, children," Ashido-sensei called. She pointed to the mat that had 12 circles painted on it. "Gather round. Everyone pick a circle to sit on." Izuku chose the red one, to match Tiki. Izuku missed Tiki. After everyone settled down, their teacher started talking. "The first thing we're going to do today is introduce ourselves and say one animal that we like the best. I'll go first. I'm Ashido-sensei, and I like bugs." There was a couple comments of, "Ew, bugs?" and "That's so gross, sensei." But Izuku was just confused. He raised his hand. Sensei, a bug isn't an animal, it's a category. It would be more correct to say I'm Ashido Sensei and I like ladybugs, because that's a specific type of bug. And Ashido Sensei said she was a teacher. She should know this. The teacher just blinked at him. Meanwhile, his classmates erupted into chaos. A bug is too an animal. You talked back to the teacher. Go to timeout. I like ladybugs too. Hey, look at my booger. Settle down, little ones, their teacher called. They didn't settle. Someone got up and started shaking Ashido Sensei's sweater. I have to pee, she stated. Ashido Sensei sighed. She called another teacher to take the little girl to the bathroom while she continued trying to calm down the class. She stood up and clapped in a pattern, which most of the students copied, except Izuku, whose hands were occupied covering his ears and thus unable to clap. Thank you for quieting down, Ashido Sensei said. Her students preened at the words. Izuku-chan is right. A bug is a category. Very smart. Now, let's continue with our introductions. They continued their introductions, with most of the kids saying dog or cat for their favorite animal, although Katsuki said grasshopper. When asked why, he said it was because he liked to take off their heads and feed them to birds. Izuku thought that was a little violent for a 4-year-old, but to each their own, he supposes. After the introductions came their first lesson, learning shapes and colors. Most of the kids knew them already and were quick to yell out their names, but a few didn't. As for Izuku, he was just bored. He decided to let the other kids answer questions since this was too easy for him. Or he would have, had their teacher not called on him. Izuku-chan, do you know what shape this is? She held up a square. Izuku decided to mess with her a bit. That's a parallelogram, with 4 equal sides and 4 equal angles, also known as a square. Don't you know your shapes already? Why are you asking us? His teacher stared at him in open-mouthed shock. Yeah, Izuku was so going to ace this preschool thing. Izuku was not acing this preschool thing. He had been having a good day, all things considered. He kept messing with Ashido Sensei whenever no other teachers were around, but made sure to act normal when they were. She was convinced he was a genius, but couldn't prove it. Izuku was having the time of his life. It was recess, and he and his classmates were playing in the fenced-in playground. Izuku and Katsuki had gathered a few other kids to play heroes and villains when he saw it. A black butterfly. It was cold. So cold. She had been fighting for almost 3 days with minimal rest. Kat had died trying to protect her from a shot the first day, even though Marinette told him that she needed him alive. The Akuma, freezer burn, had the power to trap anything in their unbreakable ice. It was a simple power, but an effective one. By day 2, Marinette realized she needed help. She couldn't get anywhere near the Akuma without them sending out a wave of ice, trapping everything and everyone in its path. She watched so many people suffocate to death, face turning a ghostly shade of blue as their friends and family tried fruitlessly to break them out of the ice. So, she headed to the bakery, past her frozen parents, to her room where she kept the miracle box. She lifted the floorboard and pulled out the box. She didn't know who to call on. She didn't know. She was hyperventilating. She could feel Tiki trying to comfort her, but she just felt so lost. She didn't want this. She never wanted this. After calming, at least minutely, from her impromptu breakdown, Marinette pulled out the snake and the fox. She opened the box to the fox, and Trix flew out happily. Guardian, it's great to... He cut himself off. He was about to start chatting to her, but the look on her face and the slight chill in the air stole the words from his mouth. Trix, croaked out Marinette, I need your help. Always for you. After merging the fox with the ladybug, Marinette went out in search of Luca. He's alive. He has to be. She kept repeating to herself like a mantra. As she approached his houseboat, there was the faint scent of iron in the air. Marinette noticed a smear of blood on the floorboards, leading down to the underside of the hole. No. Please, no. Luca? Marinette called softly. She could hear faint sniffles from below the deck. Marinette opened the door and descended the stairs. What she saw at the bottom made her blood run colder than the air around her. Jaluka. She was covered in blood. She didn't have any ice on her, so it couldn't have been the Akuma, right? But then, what happened to her? Marinette rushed to her friend, falling to her knees beside Luca, who still sat clutching his sister. Jaluka? Hey, Jaluka, can you hear me? Marinette reached out towards her and brushed the hair out of her face. Her skin was cold to the touch, colder than it should be, regardless of the air. Jaluka, wake up, please! Please wake up, Kwame, no! Jaluka, I need you! No, please! Marinette begged. Tears were streaming down her face. Stop it. She's gone, Luca stated. His voice almost monotone, but she could hear the raw emotion behind his words. He laid Jaluka down and carefully stood up. Marinette continued to sob. Come on, you need my help, right? The only way we can save her now is if we beat the Akuma and you cast your miracle cure. He was right. She knew he was, but she was grieving. Her friend was dead, and Kwame, there was so much blood. But she got up. She pushed all her emotions down. She had a job to do. Jaluka didn't wake up. She had died from a piece of building falling on her stomach and crushing her. What killed her technically had nothing to do with the Akuma, and thus the miracle cure couldn't help. It was all faulty construction. Marinette had never been the same after that. When Izuku came to himself, it was to see cream-colored walls and a concerned face holding his hands. He blinked slowly. His brain felt groggy, and his face felt sticky. Izuku-chan, are you all right? Can you hear me now? His teacher spoke in a quiet tone, the same one you would use on a scared kitten or a crying infant. Izuku was neither. Normally, that would upset him, but he was too tired to feel much of anything. Izuku opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. So instead, he just nodded his head. Good, that's good. She sounded quiet and gentle, in a way Izuku didn't deserve. It was his fault. His friend had died. His fault. His fault. Izuku stopped that train of thought quickly. He shut down his emotions with practiced ease. He didn't want to get akumatized. Can I let go of your hands? Will you be safe? Izuku was confused. Why wouldn't he be safe? That thought was followed by a twinge of pain. He looked down to see his small arms covered in tiny scratches. No more than what a kitten would give you, but present nonetheless. Had Izuku done that? He couldn't remember. He couldn't remember much of anything, really. His mind felt kind of floaty and not all there. He thinks his teacher said something else after that, but Izuku couldn't hear her over the cotton in his ears. This was nice. He felt like he was flying. At some point, Izuku's dad, his mom worked all day today, so it couldn't have been her, must have picked him up from school because he blinked and suddenly he was on his couch, wrapped in fluffy blankets, and All Might documentary on the TV. Izuku brought his hand up to rub his eyes. Had his dad chosen that show just for him, even though he didn't like All Might? Hey, kid, came a rumbling voice from behind him. He looked up to see his dad. He must be sitting on his lap. Normally, that thought would be followed by Izuku promptly leaving said lap, but he was so tired, and his dad was so warm. A few more minutes wouldn't hurt. He could go back to hating him later. How are you feeling? Izuku just shrugged. He didn't know what he was feeling. Was he feeling anything at all? That's all right, bud. Can you tell me what happened that upset you so much? Izuku just shrugged again. He tried to concentrate, but piecing together his thoughts was like sifting through a muddy lake trying to find a baseball. Did something happen to upset Izuku? He couldn't remember. He couldn't remember much of anything. It's okay if you can't. If you're having trouble speaking, we can get your board out. Izuku's parents had gotten him a communication board when they thought he wouldn't learn to speak. It was pretty basic, seeing as it was built for a 3-year-old, but it got the job done. Izuku shook his head. The problem wasn't his lack of speech so much as he just didn't know. His brain felt like mush. His dad seemed to take the hint and stopped asking Izuku questions. Maybe he knew Izuku was too tired to deal with words and thoughts, or maybe he just didn't want to mess up the one time his son was willingly sitting with him without his mom there to pretend for. Whatever the reason, Izuku was glad for it. He felt like sleeping for 1,000,000 years. He pulled the blanket back over his shoulders and turned to bury his face into his dad's chest. He dozed off to the sounds of how All Might started his Bronze Age. This concludes Chapter 5 of The Second Life of the Guardian. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I kind of feel like I just baited you all with a bunch of fluff and then was like, surprise, here's a bunch of sad stuff. But I hope you like it anyways, and the next part should be up soon. Thank you so much for listening.